Hello everybody and welcome back to PSVR2 News, where today we've got three things to talk about, two smaller things, and then the main crux of today's video will be talking about Shuhei Yoshida, who is a very familiar name to the VR space that we haven't heard from in a while, but recently he went on the Skill Up podcast. So we're going to dive into that with two items to talk about before then. So without further ado, we'll thank our patrons and members. Feel free to like and subscribe if you aren't already. It's only 25% new actually sub to the channel. And let's start things off with some long-awaited news from Wanderer the Fragments of Fate. So over on the Mighty Eyes Discord, one of the mods there basically said, oops, we haven't been very vigilant at keeping this channel updated for Wanderer the Fragments of Fate. They added their most recent patch notes from June and September, but at the end of all this, they said on October 23rd, Hotfix 5 should be coming out with the PCVR launch. So I want to say this was slated for earlier this year. I want to say maybe like September, or maybe it was late September, early October, I'm not sure. But if you've been waiting for Hotfix 5, that'll be coming. I don't know how big of an update this will be. I've got to be honest, for Wanderer the Fragments of Fate, I'm a little bit disenchanted with it now. I was really looking forward to it before launch, and the first 2 hours that I played back when it came out, I did really enjoy, and that's what I made my first impressions of. If you missed that back then, I essentially played it for only 2 hours because I was heading over to Japan for a month, so I actually got hands-on with the game about 6 hours before my flight took off. So I played through 2 hours of the game, got that footage onto my SSD, and then flew over to Japan with all of my editing stuff, basically. And I then covered what I could of the game, and I did really enjoy it. The combat was not great at all, but the rest of the game I did really like. However, past that, the game seemed to kind of fall apart and break, literally just past the point where I stopped, and I did feel really bad about that, having a positive impression when the rest of the game wasn't up to the standard and the quality that I played. But it has had loads of hot fixes, and I will at some point go back and revisit it, I think. Probably once they've said this is the state that we're happy with it in. When the devs are happy and when all the fixes and changes are put in, I will play through the entire game. I'll review it on the channel. I probably won't do a playthrough because usually I like to do those when it's a bit more like topical, but maybe I will. But at least I'll do a review because I feel like that game has so much potential, and it sucks to see what happened to it earlier this year. But if you've been waiting for Hotfix 5, then that will be coming on the 23rd of October, and if you've been waiting for it on PC, then that'll be the same. If you pay close attention to PSN profiles, then you'll notice that Reach is now available on there. Now, PSN profiles is a website where you can see the trophies of certain games, ones which aren't out, and basically when the trophies pop up on this website, it means somebody has unlocked one and kind of unlocked the whole list for everyone to see. That was me and Games with T yesterday, along with probably a couple of other PSVR2 reviewers. We have now got access to the game, hands-on to Reach. It comes out in 2 days, I want to say. I don't know if I can say when the embargo is, but it's kind of close, isn't it, for keys? I'm about, I would say, 70% of the way through the game as of today. Literally as of recording this an hour before it goes live, this video. So I should have it finished. I have a busy end to the week, but right now I'm just focused on getting through Reach, and there will be a full playthrough on the channel along with my review, which will go live whenever the embargo is. I almost just said it then. Oopsies. Maybe I'm allowed to say. I don't know. I've got to be careful. Anywho, that's positive. We have access to the game, and I'm excited to share my thoughts with you on that. Speaking of Reach, one of the people who is very heavily involved in it was Shuhei Yoshida. He used to work at Sony, and he was very involved in the VR side of things at Sony. He loved the PSVR1, PSVR2, and unfortunately departed, I want to say earlier this year, or maybe it was last year. Time goes very, very fast nowadays. But Shuhei is a legend of the VR scene. He is such a positive force. He's just a fantastic guy. And even when PSVR2 wasn't officially revealed, or wasn't really like shown off that publicly, he was taking people at events like Gamescom and taking them behind the scenes to try it out before it was available. So he's really been pushing for VR for a while, and he was on the Skill Up podcast, which is a great podcast in its own right. Skill Up are a great channel, amazing reviews, really enjoy their stuff, and this was a really welcome surprise to see Shu on there. So he spoke about a couple of things, and after listening through it, the main points essentially are, he talked about Reach VR, which was mostly focused on him being involved with the early development of that. He's got a bit of a rapport with the Endreams team, so when Elevation came to him and they collaborated, he gave feedback early on. So great to see him really involved in that. He's really excited for Reach. He's made that clear publicly multiple times over the last couple of months building up to the launch of the game. He's really on board with it. I can see why from my demo earlier in London. I mean, I understood immediately how this game is going to be so fun in VR, so he's really on board, and he's been involved from an early development standpoint. So as for the quality of the game, I think if Shu gives it his recommendation and his assurance, then I think all of us can probably sleep soundly knowing that Reach is going to be, hopefully, a good game. He had a couple of comments on the state of the VR industry as well that I found really interesting. He of course pointed out the younger audiences that are involved in VR now. A lot of the players who jump into VR for the first time are grabbing a Quest 2 or a PSVR2 or a Quest 3 or a Quest 3S and are trying VR for the first time. And that adoption rate is really focused towards the younger audiences. Social VR games, things like VR Chat and Gorilla Tag, games that are easy to pick up. For me, I think that's a bit of a negative in certain areas. VR Chat is fantastic, I think, but in terms of games like Gorilla Tag that don't really interest me, they're kind of, it's creating a niche for a part of the VR audience that just isn't really for me. But as long as people are enjoying it, then that's great, and that's kind of what Shu's saying as well, is that we've had a shift towards that in the VR space, and I think he's spot on with that. He makes a very specific comment as well, talking about how there aren't as many big VR studios now as there used to be. There aren't as many studios jumping in and trying new things, but the ones that are there are ones that are really cemented in now and are well known. And I think I definitely see that. I mean, even with publishers, Perp Games are a great publisher who are constantly there. In Dreams are a studio that are constantly there. Vertigo Games as well. We've got many devs and publishers who are constantly popping up again and again and again because they're pushing out strong VR titles all the time. So even though there aren't as many studios, the ones that are there are very strong, is what he's saying, and I definitely agree with that. The final thing he talked about was actually PSVR2 itself, and he's kind of just confirming stuff that we've already known for a while, but it's nice to hear it from somebody who was involved on the Sony side of things. Of course, he's probably under various NDAs about what is actually coming. He couldn't have hopped on here and been like, oh yeah, Resident Evil 9 is going to be on PSVR2. I'm sure that would get him in a lot of trouble, but what he could say was about Sony's strategy. Less money put into first-party games, but more money put into third-party investments, like Resident Evil, like Hitman, and like Microsoft Flight Simulator. He describes these as quite steady investments, and if that is going to be the case over the next couple of years, then I think I'll be pretty happy. Games like Flight Sim and Hitman offer so much content that I don't really care that they're not made by Sony. Of course, it'd be nice to have Sony IPs like God of War and Spider-Man, but in terms of actual game quality, we can get just as good titles from studios that aren't first-party Sony. And finally, he mentions that Sony's investment in VR is still positive, which is nice to hear from him. But I'll link it down below. I encourage you to go and listen to it because he kind of shines a light on a lot of other stuff in VR, and he's one of the best in the industry. So I'll leave that link down below to the Skill Up podcast there. Anyway, that'll be all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.